The news, of course, is the backup, and the backup is where we talk about the most hard-hitting news of the week. As long as it's related to video games, sure, the BBC only showed 6 hours of Prince Philip's funeral coverage, but we won't be talking about that. You could just head to Twitch, and you can get literally thousands of hours of people in caskets, or hot tubs. I can't quite tell what she's sitting in. As usual, the Back Podcast is brought to you by Hero Pocketeer Tim from the Learn Programming Academy. Get your exclamation mark Tims out in the chat, because the Learn Programming Academy offers classes covering the entire range of programming that are easy to watch for all skill levels, and they're almost all $20 or less. Head to lpa.dev/backpocket to download the custom Backpocket info guide on everything Tim has to offer and become the coding genius you did not know you were. I am not a coding genius, but I am a news savant. So let's jump into it, gentlemen, with our first story. And that is that Epic are going to lose over $300 million on the Epic Games Store thanks to their exclusives, and they're totally fine with that. Taylor Wilde from PC Gamer reports that to take on Steam, Epic Game has spent the last 2 years shoveling Fortnite money into the Epic Games Store, making over 100 exclusivity deals and giving away free games every single week. We knew Epic was spending a lot of cash to get customers onto its store, but didn't have many specifics until now. Thanks to Epic's big legal fight with Apple, we learned this week that Epic committed around $444 million to Epic Game Store exclusivity deals in 2020 alone. That is $444 million on minimum guarantees for games that release on the Epic Games Store, but they stay off Steam for a year, and a minimum guarantee is basically just like an advance in the book publishing world, that you're going to get that money no matter what happens for your game. In the report, they said that Epic put down $10.45 million for the rights to Control. The end of year report said that Epic players had spent $700 million on the Epic Store in 2020, but third-party game sales only accounted for $265 million of that spending. So basically, they're saying that Epic Game Store will have lost in total by the end of 2021 at least $330 million, and they are fine for that if it gets people onto their store. Peter, you are a business genius. Is this the kind of business that you would operate?
Look, I think it all comes back to the old adage of you got to spend money to make money. And back when I was CEO of... I'm out.
Yeah, I like Nick's character.
For so long.
I like Nick's character when he appropriately coughed before he said, "So we've made a loss of $333 million."
We don't like to talk about numbers around here.
Yeah,
it's more feelings. We're selling feelings here. Look, I mean, I'm sure they know what they're doing. They've got money to play with, so it's about building the platform. I would say anecdotally that I installed the Epic launcher to get one of those quote unquote free games, free for me. And it's still not a launcher that I have set to boot on launch of my computer. I rarely check it. It's only in desperate times do I go across to the Epic launcher and go oh, what's over here at the moment? So
when you can't find that one game that you're I'm still looking for it, and they're it's on Epic.
You Google and it's it's on Epic. Okay. It's on Epic, of course, yeah. So it's pretty rare that I'm heading there, and it's still not front of mind for me as a platform. Even with it's been around for as long as Game Pass, and it hasn't captured my attention the way that Game Pass has as a storefront, and it is effectively a storefront. And I still think of the publisher ones before I think of Epic. Even though Epic is a publisher, I still think of Origin, and then I guess Ubisoft Connect now. Before I've got Epic.
You still think of Origin before Epic?
Yeah, totally. I play more EA games. I play EA games. EA have great games. Epic have Fortnite. So there's nothing drawing me to that platform because I'm not playing Fortnite. So yeah. And plus, sorry, I was just going to say, plus Origin forced their way into your Steam library by going you've got Battlefield on Steam. Let's launch through Origin.
Yeah. You thought you could get away. Yeah. But Gus, I mean, part of this, right, is the fact that we're just old. And if we were 12-year-olds getting into Fortnite, then potentially the Epic Game Store is the first game store that we've actually come in contact with. We're just used to
Sure,
Steam.
but I doubt they'd be calling it, those kids would be calling it the Epic Game Store front. They'd be calling it my Fortnite launcher. Because I'm sure to many people, those younger gamers, that's exactly all that it really serves as. I mean, yeah, talking about those figures earlier on, there's nothing really particularly, I guess, not so much newsworthy, but like controversial about it. Like, this is just looking behind the curtain of what is I would assume, as Pete said, like a long-term investment on them, and just the figures that represent that. So there's not so much, I guess, like dodgy dealings. Like when I first saw this, I thought, oh, what have they done wrong, or what sparked this as a discussion point, versus like, yeah, if you look, I'm sure there are heaps of giant companies that are absolutely sinking cash for the sake of that turning into an investment. I think they predicted something like they want to see it doing well by like 2027, like some very off distant years.
2020, I think it was 2024 that they were talking about.
2024.
Apple said 2027.
Yeah, that's what
Epic
I read.
said they were more optimistic that it was like 2024.
But those are realistic goals time-wise for figures that large. So yeah, as I agree with everything Pete was saying in regards to the fact that this is not a platform that I gravitate towards, and that those free games are there, but they're not really drawing me towards it. So whether or not they're going hard enough, I would probably say not. It's like, it's something that they really need to make it and the user interface isn't particularly engaging or memorable. And so whether or not those exclusives, or that they're buying their way into the exclusives, is actually making them a one-stop shop for where you go for your gaming. But I appreciate the investment in a lot of the developers, and those, as you said, those sort of those investments like advances for the developer companies to make sure they get their profits from the game regardless of how well it does. That's kind of reassuring from a platform, I guess.
I think it's interesting that, like, I think you're not giving kids enough credit that they think it's just a Fortnite launcher. Like, they couldn't outdo you in every way possible when it comes to technology. But I think that when it's strange, I guess it's strange that, like, you're seeing amount of money that they're dumping in here, and they're basically going like, we just want to take a chunk out of Steam. I imagine, like, I don't know if they necessarily think that by 2024 they're going to be the primary platform, but I think that they're hoping that they'll be turning a profit by that point. For some context, one of the last figures we got for Fortnite, as of last April, Fortnite made $400 million in 1 month. So they can certainly afford to put this money into it. You've got a company that is making $3.85 billion in gross profit on $9.6 billion in revenue. So, $300 million is not the end of the world for them. But I just think it's interesting how hard it is to change launches. We've got like a weird, beyond the fact that, like, you're right that the Steam, like the Epic Games launcher is missing a ton of features. It's missing a ton of just normal user interface stuff that make it easy to navigate the store and find new things and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, if you've got a friends list on Steam, then all those people are there. But for me, I'm like, well, I rarely go through Steam to just sort of find things. I tend to get my information from outside, and then I go to Steam to buy the thing. I don't really play games with other people, so my friends list on Steam doesn't really matter. But I still go, I do not want to buy a game on a different platform. I've got a pile of games over here, and I don't want to have a small pile of games over here in this other launcher. So it's kind of like, I guess, like changing banks in my mind. It's like too difficult to make me do it. But hopefully, if you can get people who, have been playing Fortnite and haven't really started a PC game collection, then that's where that's the sort of people, I guess, that they're going after, that in a few years' time that's going to amount to something that does actually take a chunk.
Yeah, it is habit breaking, and Steam was the first habit for us as like a platform to start collecting our games on. So yeah, I know Pete in particular and my lists now are just epically large on Steam, to really mix metaphors there. But like, yeah, you're like, that is where, Pete, I imagine you go to because you just have such a catalogue of games in that already.
No, I go to it because it's good and it works. Like,
okay.
If that's a challenge that Epic have, is that their major competitor is not only still better than them, in terms of the amount of like functionality and games that it has on the platform, but it is just really effective as a platform. And yeah, it's not perfect, but it works really well. So people aren't looking for the next thing. It's not like when Microsoft buys Skype and then Skype becomes a nuisance on your computer and you're looking to get something other than Skype and you're just waiting for that next thing to come along. No one's waiting for the next game launcher. Steam works fine. And like,
I would say that they were like, when I heard about Stadia, I was like, oh, that's in, like, when we initially heard about Stadia, I was like, that's potentially interesting.
Yeah.
I'm getting it all from the cloud. There's that feature of like, you can watch someone play and then you can click a thing and like, you can buy the game directly from there or pick up the game from where they are and all that sort of stuff, where I go, you're right. Like, it's like a ton of extra stuff on top of this is a place where you buy games and can install them.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I'm not attached to Steam in like sure, I have a huge library, but I play 3% of it. If that, like, you know, you play through the game and you're done with it, I'm okay leaving that behind because I'm not going to play 95% of the games I've played again. I'm going to play Dota still. And like maybe Steam one day just becomes my Dota launcher. But yeah, like I would move to Epic if it made sense to move to Epic, but there's no reason to move to Epic as a main kind of launcher. So
yeah. It's interesting that they've gone that route of like, we'll just give you free stuff for as long as we possibly can to see if we can get you there. I think they're doing the right thing with the exclusives. I mean, that's what the Game Pass system is basically going like, pay this amount of money, but you can only play the games on this service. So unfortunately, like most of the stuff is a timed exclusive for Epic because they're not putting out that many games themselves. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. But they may not need to get all these deals with exclusive third-party people because they might just own all the games themselves, because Epic have launched Core on their platform and they're also a major investor in the service. Core, again, this is a thing like Roblox that I feel like not a huge amount of people know about, but has the potential to really change the way that we play video games. It's a new Roblox-esque virtual hub for making, sharing, and playing games, and is now available for free on the Epic Game Store. Even though it's just entering early access, Core has already amassed over 20,000 playable games in its year-long alpha, with roughly 200 games added or updated daily, according to developer Manticore Games. Those range from shooters, RPGs, and side-scrollers to MOBAs, farming sims, survival games, and plenty more. The key selling point of Core is that it's literally all there. In theory, its library games is limited only by its users and creative tools that Core gives them. When we were talking about Roblox IPO a couple of weeks ago, Gus, you were like, you were sort of looking at them going, it's just so janky looking. Everything just looks so childish, so cartoony. Core really stepping it up, and it's powered by Epic's Unreal Engine as well. Is this the kind of game making world that you could see taking off for a more adult audience?
Yeah, totally. I think what we're seeing is obviously the creme de la creme of what's being made in it so far, because that's how they're showing off this at launch. But I think obviously I'm really keen to dive into this as someone who likes making things. I want to have a play around and see how user friendly and how accessible it is to make something that looks amazing with as few steps as possible. But I think there's kind of a bit of a push and pull regarding that accessibility and the simplification of the graphics and the interface and how you would build something. Because, the more complicated your graphics, lighting, and elements are, the more technical it is to make. So I'd be keen to see how they've simplified it, how they've made it as accessible to everyone, because there's a lot of work still has to go into this kind of stuff to make something that looks far more polished like these games are, versus your Roblox, your Minecraft. People are happy to excuse how simple it all looks. But I'm really keen. I want to see if they can deliver on that level of sort of simplicity to build a game. But at the end of the day, I'm still always like, the promises that are being made or touted here about the idea that this is like, oh, well, why would you need any other games when we can just have people use people as a source to make every kind of game we want. They still have that kind of like made in an engine feel, this homemade style where ideas can be really great, but you can only push them so far when you are using a custom engine like this. not custom, I guess, like a sort of an accessible free,
like just limited tool set, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm always excited by the ideas, because this is where great ideas come from before, a AAA developer swoops in and says, I'm going to take that now and turn that into my game. So for more of them to be hopefully occurring is great, but I think they're overlooking the idea that your Robloxes and your Minecrafts and stuff still have an appeal out of, that's not what they were intended to be almost. It's like that's sort of what they turned into, these playgrounds for people to create their own games in, and suddenly that became the draw card. That became the really interesting thing. So I guess I'm just pessimistic in the sense that any goal that people go for, it's like, and you're trying to capture that lightning in a bottle of here's the where people can go to make their own games. Will it be as successful? I'm always skeptical that it won't be. So, which is again super negative, but yeah, I'm curious to see how it does with the general population building games, not just these sort of people showing off the best parts of it thus far. But it looks cool. I'm going to give it a go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really smart move by Epic. They've long been they've always had great engines, and about the better part of a decade ago, they started licensing out their engine to smaller developers to give them the tools they needed to make really good-looking, cool games with maybe less of a experience and skill set in terms of raw coding than would be required otherwise without the Unreal Engine power. And that's been a really effective thing for Epic in terms of like getting more games played on their engine, getting more games made on their engine. And I think like the thing that was probably missing from that whole ecosystem around this engine was something like this, where there's a way for all of these things to exist next to each other, the cream to get lifted to the top through kind of like voting systems. Devs are able to put these things out in maybe a little rougher shape, and it gives Epic a way to find that talent pool, find the ideas that they think are really cool. And then, I don't think anything that's on core is going to be a final version of a game. I think it's just a really good way for them to go like, there's an idea with a cool developer behind it. Let's give them a bit of money. And like, we've got a new thing that Epic own, right? It's like, it's in the same way that Blizzard had, not in the right ways, had all the modding happening in Warcraft and StarCraft, and Dota slipped through their fingers, right? But and then they came back hard and had the wrong policies around modding in their Warcraft 3 remastered and stuff like that. But I think Epic, they've built this foundation, and I think this is a really smart way of doing what Warcraft tried to kind of shoulder their way into with the Warcraft 3 remastered.
Manticore, who develop Core, say they're offering a direct 50% revenue share on in-game Core purchases as well. So we'll see how that turns out. Again, like Roblox, you can buy cosmetics and stuff within the game, and some people have turned that into a way to make some serious money. This is like not to be dismissive, but like baby's first game develop where you even get a bit of revenue share. It's interesting because you see something like this with I immediately thought of Dreams.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of Dreams. I think that Sony probably didn't get behind Dreams as much as they potentially could, of really pushing that. Like to me, Dreams is that game like Astro's Playroom that should be just auto-installed on a PS5. Yep. It should be like, there should be a really simple version that takes you through, like, here's 10 games that we think you should play that have all been made within Dreams, etc., etc.
Yeah.
The only issue with Dreams is that it's a tool set that doesn't really translate to anything else. Like, it's this own bespoke game creation engine that doesn't, that if you learn that, you can learn principles behind how to design a game, but you can't necessarily take experience in how to do it and translate it to a different engine. This being built on Unreal Engine, even though it will be a much more accessible version of it, like, Epic are really, it feels like they're just putting it together, all those pieces to just own gaming from beginning to end. Like, if you've got an engine, you've got a platform in which you can build and distribute games, they've got a storefront that can sell games. You don't ever need to leave the Epic ecosystem in order to, like, come up with a game, make it, and sell it. And last week they released that beta for the NPC creator. That's that insane, like, photorealistic NPCs that you can just, like, if you can think of like something like that being dropped into something like Core, there is this sort of much more, I guess, like, democratization of game development, but using tools that actual game developers use in the first place. So yeah, I think it's a really smart move that Epic are making. I'm a little, as always, I get a bit concerned when I see the same company's name on every part of any business model. Like, if it's like, if you have to be part of the Epic ecosystem from literally the beginning of game development until the end.
We don't just sell the lamp. We own the whaling company that gets the whale blubber for the lamps.
Exactly, yeah. And so, but you know, that is modern business, I suppose. But again, Epic, with this money that they have to do something with, because they're certainly not going to pay tax with it, by pushing it into these sort of things, you know, we could see them in 5 years' time being the sort of Amazon of video games, where you just go, like, they own so many things that you don't even realize that you're interacting with. So yeah.
And I'd be curious to see, just back on that point about, like, the idea of the core creator and the things they've been selling as ideas for games, like full sci-fi RPGs with currencies and all that kind of stuff. I'm more curious to see in 2 years the person who comes up with the weird, batshit crazy idea for a little game that suddenly everyone starts remaking in that engine and turns into a new genre that no one saw coming, kind of thing. Like, that's why I think these tools are always really interesting, because people don't use them the way they're intended. And when you do mass or give them to the masses with a less steep learning curve, you do come up with some really interesting little, like, genres and games that suddenly take over like crazy. So that's technically what happened with Fortnite, almost. Not the creation of it, but the way it was not expected to take off. Totally. It was going to be a different game altogether. So maybe, as I said, they might get lucky with just crowdsourcing the newest game, the newest genre, the newest idea.
You're right. And RTS gave us tower defense and MOBAs, like, you know, two really, like, huge concepts still in gaming. So
yeah, totally.
That auto chess is still a thing, apparently.
Yeah, that's true.
God, remember auto
chess?
Remember how everyone was talking about auto chess there for a while, and I'm sure a lot of people still play it, but I haven't thought about the word auto chess in 6 months. Something I think about all the time, though, one of my favorite games of all time, BioShock. It looks like, we knew that we were getting a new BioShock game, but some more details have potentially emerged. Ian Boudreau? I'm going to say Baldro. Ian Merlot from PC Games N writes that we heard a while back that 2K Games was spinning up a new studio to work on the next entry in the BioShock series, and some new job listings have provided a few more details about what we can expect when we finally see it. Unlike the BioShock games of the past, the next chapter in the FPS game series will be an open-world game featuring character-driven stories and both primary and secondary missions. The studio working on the next BioShock game is called Cloud Chamber and is currently hiring for several positions. These include AI programmer, UI UX designer, tools programmer, senior world designer, senior technical designer, and a senior writer. This last position, based in the Montreal office, will be responsible for helping create the narrative content for BioShock 4, and the ad says the studio is looking for someone who can, quote, weave impactful, character-driven stories in an open-world setting. Other clues about BioShock 4 could be found in the other job postings. The AI programmer role, for instance, explains the job will involve developing an urban crowd system and systematic tribal ecology of a sometimes hostile AI. Peter, do you want your next BioShock game to be an open world one? Because I don't.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily against it. I'm like, I had fun with BioShock and Infinite, and I love the settings that they're in. They do feel very linear, like narrow. Mm-hmm. So I feel like they could do with being a little more open. I don't want Skyrim BioShock, but yeah, like I'm kind of a little burned out on the series, so I think a change up would actually be quite nice to see from my perspective. Mm-hmm. Because, like, obviously the really effective game was BioShock 1 with the big twist in it, and that couldn't really be done. Well, it couldn't be done to the same effect in an open world. The kind of linear, really directed narrative can only be done in kind of a level-based kind of shooter, which it was, and it was done really, really well. But that's done. So, yeah, I'm happy to see something new. What are your concerns about BioShock being open world?
I love the I think of BioShock. I guess when I think of BioShock, I think of two things. I think of really strong narrative and world building, and I think of basically a cool interaction of systems and powers. Systems and powers interacting can happen in any sort of environment, but for me, BioShock is really about like telling a story about a fallen world in some way. I guess that for me, open world games always just end up feeling padded out. They always feel like they're filled with things that are there to justify keeping you in the world longer rather than keeping you in the world for the length of the story that they're trying to tell. So I guess that's my big concern. That being said, it doesn't necessarily, like when they say an open world game, that's becoming more and more like a cloudy term, I guess.
Yeah.
Like you said, it doesn't need to be Skyrim. You could say that God of War is an open world game insofar as you can go back to different areas and move to different parts of this world whenever you want. You could even think of something like Hitman as being like, well, or Dishonored, where you go, we have these big levels that now you can just go and approach in any way that you want, rather than BioShock, which was literally like, hey, you're walking through these corridors, you're going through, like, you're just heading this one direction. So I would be cool with the idea that it's like, we have opened up the play space, but not necessarily you're now just wandering around and picking up side quests and like choosing to either do the mainline thing or go collect this thing that's just here to fill time, I guess.
Because I'd argue that almost was, you're right when you say that the first BioShock was literally corridors. You were, under the sea and moving through linear narrative corridors. From memory, I thought Infinite did open up those spaces considerably with some side objectives to an extent. But you're right, to then address it as open world, I think, means that they are definitely rethinking that approach and going for something a little larger in scale. I'm actually really open to this. I love this idea because for me, the thing I took away from the end of Infinite, no spoilers, is that they did really open the door in terms of where that series could go. And it was a nice finishing point for that game and for the series pre-DLC. But I always think about that ending and I think about the opportunity to explore. And I would hope that maybe they want to use some of that. I mean, this is speculative, but they could be, if they want to tie it into the BioShock sort of ethos and lore and everything like that, I feel like it would be cool to suddenly have opening up the universe of BioShock in a way. And so that's an element of the open world I'd like to see. But I do agree with what you're saying in terms of, open world has a bit of a stigma attached to it that it can just be that sort of like, here's your shopping list of things to do. But I think they would probably approach it in a slightly different way because for me, as I said, BioShock Infinite had a little bit of that in it. It had areas that were optional. It had side quests and audio logs and a few little things. And the map itself or the world itself was open-ish. Like you could choose different directions.
I think that was more in the design than the world design than the level design. Like it felt open because you were in the sky rather than in tubes underwater, but you still couldn't walk very far to your left or right. It was just like you're on a floating platform, and then there was just death if you jumped over that ledge. Like there were some open play areas, but they were still quite small. They were still like shooter big. I would like to see. I think the storytelling we know in this world can be really, really, really cool. And I think if there's like 3 or 4 side quests per mini hub that were really connected to the story, they felt like you had to do them to get the most out of the game. I think they could totally pull that off, and then it would be a really smart choice. Because again, like I don't know if I want to play another really linear version. Because BioShock Infinite was cool because it was in the sky, but it actually wasn't that good a game. Like it was. I appreciated that I liked the first two or the first BioShock more than Infinite. Like when I look back on them and the experience I had with them, I agree.
But
yeah, it's interesting. I didn't even think about this, but who was it? Someone in the chat, where I think it was Titus 92 said maybe it is open world in the sense that Prey is, and that's exactly like I would be so happy with that. And Prey is basically just like space BioShock, and it is that thing of like you can go all the different areas on the space station, but the story that's being told is super BioShocky. Like everything about the way that they're telling that story is just like the BioShock story is being told. And yeah, if it's something like that, I love that idea. Also, I feel like inherently it kind of would be. I guess they could do anything, considering we didn't expect Infinite. Like when Infinite got revealed, it was so different from BioShock 1 and 2 in terms of how it looked. But I don't imagine them creating a world like, say, Fallout, where you can just wander for miles, because it's like the thing that keeps defining BioShock is these small areas that have been sectioned off from the rest of society to create a perfect society. And that doesn't necessarily gel with the idea of like a country that you just wander around or something. And, you know, maybe they're upending all of that, but I would hope it's this thing that we're talking about, I guess, where it's somewhere in the middle.
The locations are the heroes of those games, those cities, those biomes, whatever they want to be. And so you're right, they either need to find the new setting that is going to get everyone hooked, and it is just a larger version of that. Or, as I said earlier, I'd love to see them maybe fracture that and start really playing with all the other variations of it and let you bounce between them. And maybe that's the open worldness that they're going for, in which case that's something I'd be really keen for.
I can see a big lighthouse being a hub, and then you go through... to different areas from there.
Totally. But regardless, I am really keen for a new BioShock, and you know, it still is ages away because they haven't even technically started development in a meaningful sense. But I am waiting with bated breath for that one. Something that we can wait for, but we're not going to get, is the Lord of the Rings MMO that Amazon were developing, because it, like so many things, games that Amazon create, has been cancelled. Jason Schreier from Bloomberg reports that Amazon's embattled video game division has cancelled an online role-playing game based on the fantasy series Lord of the Rings, which was announced in 2019 in another setback for the technology giant. The game had been in development at Amazon Game Studios alongside the China-based Leiyu Technology Holdings, which was purchased by Tencent in December. The resulting contract negotiations led to a dispute between Amazon and Tencent that eventually caused the game's cancellation, said people familiar with the matter who were asked not to be identified because they weren't authorized to speak publicly about the issue. An Amazon spokesperson confirmed that after Tencent's acquisition of Leiyu, quote, "We have been unable to secure terms to proceed with this title at this time. The Amazon team working on the game will be moved to other projects. We love the Lord of the Rings IP, and we are disappointed that we won't be bringing this game to customers." So Amazon, like a terrible string of video game titles being cancelled. Obviously, there was Breakaway and Crucible, two games that one cancelled before release, one cancelled before release, and then New World, which is their other sort of MMO, has been repeatedly delayed. This one, while still a setback, I guess publicly, seems to be slightly different. Gus, here, that it seems to be a dispute where they couldn't come to terms on this after a sale, as opposed to, oh, the game's just not working and we're not going to make it.
Yeah, which is sad. Like, I love this universe, and I would definitely dive in and try an MMO based around it as well, similar to what we're seeing here. Is, Pete, you can clarify, this is Lord of the Rings Online, which is not running anymore, I believe?
Yeah, I believe it got shut down.
Right, so this was a previous, but this, we're talking even prior to like midway through the films, I think, or the sort of rising popularity through there. So I feel like
it's still running. Lord of the Rings Online is still
going? Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
But this was more along the lines of your EverQuest, and your World of Warcraft kind of style. So I don't know what a new MMO set in that universe was going to look like, but I would speculate that, as many people have, this had a big part to tie in with the fact that Amazon are producing the TV series of Lord of the Rings, which is still in the works. So I would put money down that this had something to do with. Obviously, it was going to tie into that, I would say, or it would be very silly if it didn't, and would be some form of marketing tool to have people watching and playing along at the same time. I think historically, there's no great track record of that ever being a thing. I'm trying to remember, there was that sci-fi game that got released as a series at the same time.
It was
the
not
name escapes me.
It was,
and it wasn't something like Farpoint, whatever it was, but it was like there was a couple of Aussie actors in it, and it was like a co-released TV series and game where actors and things would pop up at the same time. And it was super novel. Defiant.
Yeah. The show was actually like decent.
I think the game wasn't terrible, but they were both apparently just so middle of the range, average, that they neither helped the other one do any better. So I would say, as that being maybe the driving force behind this being created in the first place, that's not very encouraging. I would have loved the developers to want to make this game because they see it existing on its own 2 feet. But I did love this game, Two Towers on PlayStation 2. God, now that I'll play more of. But yeah, in this case, that's why I'm okay to see this not come to fruition, because I think it would have probably been rushed to meet the show, or the show would have been rushed to fit things in from the game. And that's, as I said, nothing I've ever enjoyed in my entertainment medium. But Pete, you're the biggest Lord of the Rings fan out of all of us. Are you sad there's no more online version to play?
I just don't want an MMO in my life right now. So it's sad that it's not getting made, because I think it could be really good. I think the Lord of the Rings universe is really, really like ripe for MMO gameplay. Like even more so than, I'm not a big fan of the WoW demon stuff, like weird, sexy, dead things. So I, which is what all they do, right? It's like buff horny.
Every
dudes.
WoW player in the chat is like, that's the only reason I play
buff
that
dudes
game.
with horns, not buff horny dudes. So it's like, whatever age you're in Middle Earth, there's cool conflict between the goodies and the baddies. I think would be
that
really
was Tolkien's original byline, I think, to the novels.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, if it can't get made, shut it down. I don't think it'll be missed. I think it could be cool, but again, like, I'm not going to miss another MMO in a fantasy setting. I would like to see some more action games made, maybe around they're spending $465 million on the first series of this television show they're making.
That's insane.
There's nothing like it, and I'm sure it's going to be awful. But maybe it won't be. But
Amazon have a terrible track record with video games, but they make good TV shows.
They do make good TV shows.
Like, a lot of their Prime exclusive stuff is good.
Yeah. I just like the fact that it's called The Lord of the Rings. It's just like, it's a thing to hook people in. It's like, is it even in an era where there are rings? Probably not. Like things like War in the North were like really fun little stories, action games based in, and the EA Two Towers and Return of the King were really fun slashy games based around the films.
Shadows of Mordor, Shadows of War, they were great, and they were their own little sort of stories that did tie in pretty heavily. But
I certainly
got that
don't think
Gollum game to keep us happy.
Yeah. I mean, that's a little like story adventure game. So I don't think that will be as exciting as some of these other titles have been. But I don't think we've seen the last of Lord of the Rings in video games. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, part of it could be, and there's not a lot of information behind it, but like Tencent going up against Tencent and Amazon coming to deals is like two of the biggest companies on the planet.
Yeah,
both trying the same thing, which is to take over the world. Like I imagine that probably has something to do with it, of them going like, we want this, no, we want this. You both want exactly the same thing. So Tencent take the developer doesn't necessarily mean the idea's dead. It just means that Amazon aren't making it. Yep. So there's a very good chance that Tencent will just go, well, we're just going to make it and we're going to distribute it. I don't know how big. Like,
and you can play it on your Oppo phone this fall.
Totally, yeah. Like that they're making. I mean, they have been making moves in video games for years and years and years. But this could just be another one of those things. It does just feel like Amazon cannot get a win. This is the one department of Amazon that does not fire on every single cylinder. I feel like Jeff Bezos should take a year and just go focus on game studios, because it's whatever it is, it's just missing that magic that the rest of Amazon has. And say what you will about how Amazon operates its business and how, like, whether it's a good thing that one company owns the entire supply chain and blah, blah, blah. But when they decide to do something, most of the time, it is a massive success. And this has been such a significant failure for them at this point. And again, even though this is something that's kind of been taken away from them rather than they've just gone, we can't make this work, it does seem like, at what point do you just cut the cord on this? Because I don't know what you have. But yeah.
I think furthering that thought, Bezos should probably just take like 50 years and just disappear entirely. I think that'd be great.
That could be good too. Yeah, that could be a good idea too. There's still lots of games that you can play though. Just because you can't play the Lord of the Rings MMO doesn't mean that they aren't video games. Because last week was the Indie World Switch live stream where they revealed a bunch of indie titles coming to the platform. Gus, I think of you when I think of the Switch.
Oh,
I think
of you
much. When. Weirdly enough, I think of you when I think of little independent games, which often is not what you like to talk about on our show. But there's some cool stuff coming out. What caught your eye from the live stream? Yeah,
I mean, they were all interesting, but you're right. As indies, they were particularly, I think, indie. They were very narrative little cute stories versus your go-to kind of like Switch instant arcade sort of indie classics that I prefer to be drawn towards. So we got games like Road 96. I'll just go through these in the list that they're ordered here. Road 96 looks like an interesting kind of choose your own adventure about a couple of sort of wayward youths hitchhiking down a road. But the selling point of the trailer here was that, you know, the story keeps changing in the way that the narrator's telling it. It kind of has a Life is Strange vibe to it in terms of not just the art, but the sort of like trouble that the teens are going through, and then this bigger story. It aims very optimistically to say, like, look at all these variations of how weird this story can get. But I would skeptically say that it feels like a sort of choose your own adventure with maybe like 6 outcomes that might be variations of. But art style is really cool, and it looks like it's probably going to tackle something really, you know, meaningful and serious within all of that sort of fun, crazy road tripping kind of style.
Life is Strange is exactly what I thought when I saw this, but it has the thing that I'm glad that Life is Strange doesn't have for me, and it just looks faster. Like, it looks like
that's true.
There's just some oomph behind the storytelling. Like, Life is Strange is a series that, like, I want to like, but every time I play it, I'm just like, can you fucking get on with it, please? Can you please finish your sentence? Can you please walk a little bit faster? And this game has a sense of momentum behind it.
Yeah, it does. Like, and I would... Sorry, go ahead, Pete.
I was just going to say the way that the trailer sells the game is that there is like maybe 2-minute beats between like these little like jumps forward and where like between each decision that's going to drive the story towards one of these supposed 150,000 end scenarios.
And the way we saw it in the trailer, there's a little number in the top left that sort of flickers as these scenarios change, whether or not that's actually the mechanic that they're playing with there, which is that, you know, it's sporadically bouncing between these stories. And instead of you having a single narrative story, it's using that as a device to kind of fracture it and bounce around and tell interesting, unexplained elements to how, you know, variations and ways it could go. But yeah, it looks kind of interesting.
It looks good for a Switch game as well. I feel like it's got this sort of like nice, particularly the lighting just feels like there's a lot of depth to what's going on there, which is good to see on the Switch.
Totally. But when you were talking about some of those games like Your Life is Strange that do feel a little slower, a little more plodding, a sequel to Oxenfree 2 Lost Signals was announced or was shown off. And Oxenfree was a game that didn't really do it for me. I only probably played a couple of hours of it, and I found it just too obscure and too... I know it got great reviews. I think you played a little bit of it too, Nick, possibly on Pocket.
Yeah, I finished it on stream on Pocket, yeah.
Yeah, so you enjoyed that game, or you played it to fruition?
I finished it. I enjoyed my time with it.
Okay.
It's one of those ones that's like, it's going for weird, and it feels like it's trying to go for weird.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more, rather than like it's telling a story that happens to have strange elements to it. It's kind of like we want to set out to make a story that feels strange. But I really liked the look of it, and there were definitely some surprises as I was playing. But I'm keen for a sequel. I definitely liked it enough to play another one.
Fair enough. The sequel I really liked was Oli Oli 2, which was the sequel to Oli Oli 1, obviously. A skateboarding, side-scrolling, cool pixel art game.
Because of Xbox, we have to clarify that there is a version 1 now that there's 2 Xbox Ones. The games industry has been ruined by Xbox's naming convention.
And they've shown off Oli Oli World, which is a expansion on that game in terms of, I think, not just it looks like there's heaps more to do in terms of like characters and side quests and all this kind of stuff, but it's in a it's in a 3D engine versus the 2D art style, and I don't like it. I think this looks clunky, and I really love the art style of the original 2 games, and I found them like really cool. That sort of like kinetic, immediate sort of, I could really focus in on those little like kickflips and details, and found them like that arcade runner. Whereas here we're seeing all these side characters and like a more, I guess, Adventure Time art style, which I'm not
totally
against.
Adventure Time, yeah.
I'm not against that, but it just doesn't look as as effective for this style of gameplay. So look,
I am super keen for this. I think there's something about in the 2D art style, because I'm like you, I loved Oli Oli. I think that it's very easy to see how something looks very tight and how it plays when it's in that flat sort of 2D thing. It's a little harder to see like really tight controls in this sort of 3D with a depth situation going on. And I think the art style lends itself more to like a vibe of storytelling rather than insanely tight, difficult platforming, which is basically what Oli Oli is known for.
And it was a score chaser, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but if it has that, I actually like this art style more. And so if it has that tight feeling and awesome gameplay matched with this art style, that's super cool to me. Because, I just loved this series.
Yeah, look, I'll pick up and see how it performs, but it'll probably make me want to go and play the previous game more, to be honest. You played speaking of runners, you played the Aerial Knights Never Yield. You talked about the demo last week, and so that's getting a release soonish, I assume, May 19th, so not long. Oh, no, that was the demo.
Yeah, super soon. No, the demo's out now. May 19th is when the game's coming out. Like I said, it feels like it misses the mark a little bit for me, just in terms of like the momentum and the flow of it gets broken. But we're watching the trailer now, and if you're listening as a podcast, like I encourage you to go check out the trailer for Aerial_Knights Never Yield, because the flip between all the different art styles is, I feel like, its key selling point. So I'm keen to just check out a bit more, see if I can find my rhythm in that, because I really like how it switches between these art styles and worlds. But yeah, the demo didn't blow me away.
A lot of pastel cell shading in like every game we're seeing, including the other one was Hindsight, which looked like a very sort of slow and beautiful narrative game that looks like you're sort of reliving memories, kind of similar to that the blinking one you guys talked about last week. Before Your Eyes. It looks like that kind of reliving key points in someone's life and telling a very sort of emotional story, I would say. But are they all starting to look a bit the same, Pete?
Yeah, look, maybe there's definitely a style of like, how do we do... These developers want to tell a story, not necessarily in a game medium, not necessarily be amazing game artists. And like these simple looking games do enough to be effective in storytelling. I would say the trailer for Hindsight doesn't sell me that it's going to be effective, because the whoever the voiceover artist is for the trailer is not selling the emotion to me. I know it's hard to sell emotion in 54 seconds as opposed to a 2 or 3 hour game or whatever it is, but I don't think it doesn't sound like it's going to be a good version of one of these to me.
I think the art style as well. I agree. Like, you see it everywhere. But I do think it's like there was a time where PlayStation 1 era or something where you go like every game just looked the same and they all just look like blocky, and we're trying to figure out how to use these tools to the best of our ability. I think the fact that it can be more art as opposed to like, oh, we've made quite poor 3D models or something. I think I'll always take this look over trying to make everything like a realistic 3D world. But it is funny when you see them back to back in a live stream. You do go, wow, this is like, you really have a type, Nintendo.
Well, and we don't know really how this plays mechanically. It looks obviously like slower, and whether or not you're like, there's a key shown at the end, which might be a clue to some way that it feels like you are sort of maybe point and clicking through vignettes, that sort of thing. Again, that's just guesswork. But the next game, Last Stop, that was shown off, which is a bit more higher graphic fidelity, but like looks like a bit more of a sort of Telltale style narrative game where you are playing what looks like two characters who Freaky Friday it, and they maybe swap their situations in life, and you then have to either live out the consequences, whether or not there seems like some supernatural elements and stuff like that. But yeah, again, no real gameplay here, just like a cool art style. I actually kind of preferred this art style. I love the music in this trailer. If you get a chance to have a look at this one for Last Stop, just picks a banger of a tune to put in there and got me really revved up. Kind of felt like Doctor Who or something, and not just because they're all British voice actors in, I'm assuming, a UK setting. But yeah, again, that felt a little more exciting to me than your Life is Strange Road 96 kind of version. I liked a bit more of the freaky sort of sci-fi element to it, kind of some Stranger Things music. So yeah, I'm keen to see how this plays more than what it actually is about, I guess.
And it's published by Annapurna, and I feel like Annapurna are just one of those publishers where I go like, yeah, I'll check your thing out, because they have a good nose for great storytelling in video games.
Well, they do Oxenfree as well, don't they? I think they do.
Yeah, I think they do, yeah.
Yeah, cool. And the last one they showed off was a re-release of Fez for Switch, which I was surprised isn't on Switch already. I just assumed it was one of those kind of games that had been ported. It's a wonderful game that I've never finished. I've started 5 or 10 times, and maybe the Switch is the place that I'm going to finally get through it all. But I've always loved looking at this game. But have either of you guys finished it?
Did I finish it? I don't know that I finished Fez. I played a bunch and yeah.
I enjoyed other people finishing Fez.
Yeah.
And I loved the idea in Fez. Let's be honest, Gus, you're never going to finish Fez. The only way you'll finish Fez if either Pete or I go, oh, we're going to play Fez and finish it. Yeah. And then you'll be like, I'm going to do it before you.
We've tapped into another one there, which is you guys telling me I'll never finish it as well. That's another little one that sets me off.
Good. So, excellent. Yeah.
You'll never achieve that.
But Fez, the Switch is definitely the best platform for it.
I totally
agree.
The Vita was.
Well, God, the best platform in which soon you're able to buy the game.
But like really out of that lineup, the only kind of super pixely, arcadey, more gamey version, everything else we saw in there was very like story-driven games in that indie showcase. So yeah, look, nice that there's some games with a bit more emotional depth on the Switch, I guess, for people who love that. But
yeah, they're good picks. It's like I don't think a single one of these is an exclusive to the platform, but they're all good games for the platform.
Yeah.
It's nice to see things on it that make sense, unlike Doom.
Yeah.
Hey now, Doom Eternal coming to Switch. Gotta finish it there.
It's nice that and I like the fact that the Switch, for me, has taken on an identity of being either, obviously, like Nintendo games, but when it's not that, it tends to be games that are these sort of either narrative-driven or, like, tone poem mood pieces. That sort of thing where it's like, oh, I can curl up on the couch and play this. For some reason, those sort of, like, 2-hour games, when I play them on a TV, feel like my TV is meant for Call of Duty or something, but these sort of games, like they're intimate games, so I like playing them in a way where I'm kind of like holding it close and getting up in the grill of these people dealing with their grief.
I guess I'm getting into the same vein with the Switch as well. I'm currently playing that game about a man who has to navigate a real kind of like labyrinth of problems, and he's haunted by I guess ghosts, as you would say, as he moves through there, kind of like packing his way, packing all those issues together as a man who packs them, and you sort of verse 99 other people dealing with those issues as well. So I know what it feels like to deal with a very emotional story in the games you play on Switch.
So this is what because you said for almost every single episode we've done of Back Pocket on a Thursday night, you say, I really wish that I played games that had any sort of emotional depth or any sort of variety rather than I'm a cardboard box with a gun. And so I think that your new bit should be, even when you play cardboard box with a gun, you need to give us the elevator pitch as though it is an Annapurna published title.
Done. Yeah. Can do.
Something that has both narrative heft and excellent gameplay is Resident Evil Village. Hopefully, the Resident Evil Village showcase, I mean, it was more a Resident Evil 25-year showcase than it was a Village showcase, was on at the end of last week. Some significant stuff came out of that we'll just quickly run through. The first one I've got here is Resident Evil 4 is coming to VR, which is exciting for people who aren't me, aka people who won't very literally empty their bowels playing a horror game in VR. Resident Evil 7 in VR was so successful that 4 seems like a great opportunity to put it on there. And you know, Resident Evil's been around for 25 years, and the last 5 years of Resident Evil life seems to be we're going back to Resident Evil and sort of like bringing all these games to an audience who potentially weren't even alive when we started them. Pete, Pete and Gus, I mean, you both like VR. Either you played Resident Evil 7 at least. Pete, are you going back in for VR for 4?
No, I mean, because I don't particularly like VR, and I don't really want to. I mean, I feel like this game is old enough to just port 1-to-1 to a modern VR headset, though, which is good. It's going to look the same as it looked when it first came out. So yeah, I think it's a good thing for people who want something to play on their VR headsets. Mine is sitting around gathering dust because I don't particularly enjoy the experience.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know why I said you like VR. You're almost the opposite. You're almost actively hate VR.
I think I hate it, and I want it to fail.
Yeah.
Well, allow me to rebut that I can't wait to play this. Resident Evil 4 is one of my favorite games of all time. And I would put in there a sort of counter, Nick, that I don't think this will be scary. Resi 4 is not a scary game. It's almost sort of where they pivoted that game to a little more of a in-control action game. Yeah. There's still moments of a haunting kind of like eeriness, but by no means is it jump scares. And so I think, in VR, I don't think it's going to play great, but it's been ported. Resi 4 has been ported so many times to so many different platforms. And it's never played as well as it did on my GameCube, is what I think I played it on. But nice. The controls have always been a bit janky. So I think every attempt to kind of port that, like I don't think you could move while aiming still. Oh, no, you could. You can move while aiming, which was a big thing. That's been outdone by every third-person shooter since then, so it's become far less novel. But yeah, I think it'll be great in VR.
This is first-person as well, and obviously
Resident 4 which obviously it wasn't. So that'll lend itself to a new viewpoint, quite literally. And yeah, I loved 4, and I've been looking for a reason to go back and play it, and all the ports since have been shit. So this, I think, will be the nicest one to do it. And yeah, in the same way that you said at the start, like Resident Evil's really going back and revisiting their best ofs, and the idea, I think I'm correct in saying this, is that Resi Village is kind of a spiritual successor to 4 in its setting and tone only. I think it's like
is that
going
true?
Back to Resi 4 starts in a village at the base of a castle, and there's a very different story going on. The president's daughter has been kidnapped, so they're not going along that line. But from what I've seen from what I've seen of Village, it's taking those kind of same thematic steps, but we're getting a far different story with different characters and stuff. But it feels like that's kind of a vibe they were going for. So I think this being a game that people might replay is quite good timing, at least.
Yeah, interesting. I never played 4. I played the 1, 2, 3, skipped 4, played 5. So like I've played some good Resident Evil, but I've also played some very bad Resident Evil.
I've only played 5 and 7, I think. Yeah.
Good God. No, this isn't the way to play it for the first time. But 4 is fantastic. 4 is, one of the best games in the series, easily the best, I'd say.
Yeah, people love it. Then one of the other big things they announced is mercenary mode coming to Resident Evil Village. This is the long-running arcadey action mode that was popular in Resident Evil 5 and 6 thanks to its co-op multiplayer support, but wasn't included in Resident Evil 7 or the remakes of 2 or 3. There's a shop now, the Duke's Emporium, which you can access between areas to purchase and upgrade weapons. It's kind of like a wave mode zombies, COD zombies style thing, but in a game where I'm like, well, I don't really think of the shooting in Resident Evil as being something that I want to spend more time in than I absolutely have to. But it was a bit of a cult favorite mode. Gus, was this something that you dabbled in?
I did, yeah. Bloody Capcom. They spend so long making these beautiful, really moody, atmospheric games, and then they have a menu to go down and go, I'd like to do mercenaries mode, and it's like a voiceover will be like, starting in 3, 2, 1, and you jump in, and it's like these big obnoxious timers and UI everywhere, and it's like you give it to the C team in the dev studio who just throw everything at it. But they do turn out to be a lot of fun, and they're often quite a nice kind of like release after playing any of the Resi games where there's so much tension and there's so much like ammo scarcity. It turns into like, what would it be like if you just had infinite ammo or just
empowered.
A lot of it? Yeah, but and so in that sense, they're fun and they're not harming the rest of the game. If anything, they're probably letting those developers with the dumb ideas, they're giving them something to do so that the main game can focus on not having health bars above enemies and making the actual main game a far better cinematic experience. So look, it doesn't do any harm having them there. I feel
like it does do harm.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like it like it's a fun mode, sure, but it takes all the tension away from enemy types. It's like, oh, I know how to kill you because I've killed 400 of you in a 3-minute fast mode. I know how many bullets it takes to take you down. The thing that I found really stressful about 7 was that I would encounter something. It doesn't have a health bar, and I don't know how to take it on. I don't know if I should be shooting it. I don't know if I should be just trying to avoid it. I don't know if it's like if I can get a 2 melee hit on it and then run away. And this is just like training mode against the AI that's in the actual game. I feel like I don't think it's bad that it's there. I think it will be a fun mode, but I'm not going to touch it until I've finished 8 because I reckon it will spoil 8 for me if I do.
So interestingly enough, and I might be making this up, but I feel like it was a mode that was unlocked after finishing the game. And if not, and if I'm remembering that incorrectly, it's definitely something that I played after the story. And I 100% agree with everything you just said, though, as a way to be like, it's something to do once you finish the game. And it's like you've stopped being scared of those enemies the way you were the first time. So, and if not, I would, as you said, highly recommend that people leave this as something to do once they get through the main story itself.
It's so interesting because I was looking at it and I was in the same boat as Pete where I was like, this just feels like, again, I don't want to yuck anyone's yum, and people love this, so that's cool. And of course, it doesn't actually harm the game being there, but it does just remove the mystery behind everything. Watching it felt like when you watch, it's like you can play Dark Souls for the first time, or you watch someone speed run Dark Souls. And Mercenary Mose was watching someone speed run this game where everything that was terrifying and difficult is now just completely like just this thing that you have to deal with, as opposed to like any sort of real tension. The one thing, and I was like, oh, maybe I would check it out, but the whole upgrade system they've got there seems super boring. It's all just like, have a little bit more health, block a little bit harder, run a little bit faster are like the power-ups that you get around the map, as opposed to like when I think about like COD zombies and it's like get ice shatter bullets that rip out the intestines and freeze it around the zombie neck and also calls the zombie's mother and tells them what they've done, like and stuff like that not being in there. It's kind of like, like what is this fulfilling? But people like it. You've played it. I'm glad that it's here for you.
And from my quick bit of research, it does seem that from Resi 4 and 5, it was a mode that needed to be that was unlocked by completing the main game, regardless of what difficulty. So yeah, it is something I think even they've kept in mind, that they've thought this could ruin the game for people. So it's just a reason to keep playing after you're done. So hopefully, I don't know if they announced that with this one or if it's going to be available from the beginning. But yeah. It would be interesting to see if they do that and ruin the game by giving you an Uzi in another mode.
Yeah, totally. But then getting back to Village, the last big thing that sort of came out with, like, they played a new trailer for the game. It's looking amazing. There was tons more story stuff sort of built in there. But there was news that we're going to get a new demo. This had been known before, but now we know what the demo is going to be. It's a limited time demo that you can play for 60 minutes, and you can explore either the village or the castle or both. You basically can just have 60 minutes to wander around as much as you want. After that, then you can't play it anymore. It's a limited time demo, not only in the time that you can play, but also the amount of time that you can play, but the time that it is available for as well, which is interesting. There's like windows in North America, Europe, and Asia, 24-hour periods where you can play this demo. And in the live stream, it was interesting because they were talking about, like, in lieu of the fact that they can't take this to trade shows and take it around and show people, they're kind of trying to recreate that experience a little bit by going, there's this one day that you'll be able to play it. You can only play it for an hour. So it's like you went to E3 and lined up and got 40 minutes hands-on with the game, and then you left. And PlayStation owners, they've struck a deal with PlayStation where you can get it earlier. This weekend that just gone, you could spend 30 minutes in the village, and then next weekend you can spend 30 minutes in the castle. And then on May 2nd or May 1st, depending on where you are in the world, you can access the village and the castle for an hour. I kind of like this idea, though, of like short amount of time, limited amount of time to play. Again, just a taste of what's going on, but it'll be interesting to see how much stuff is actually in the demo. I'm actually not going to do it because I don't want to wander around and spoil things for me in terms of like layouts of areas and all that sort of
thing.
Yeah, same.
And also, like, yeah, as you said, it's people pour over demos, and, like, you know, people who are obsessed with the game will ruin elements of it both for themselves and for the internet community by doing numerous playthroughs and, you know, checking every nook and cranny and yeah, really taking away from that first experience, which the Resident Evil games are so good at doing. It's that, like, first time you walk through these particular areas. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it's cool. I think it's an interesting way. Demos themselves are so different from what they used to be that it's good to find new ways to give that to the public and then take it away, I guess.
Yeah. And then the final news story for the backup, talk about putting things in a game that completely break the world in which they're in. It looks like Rick and Morty are coming to Rainbow Six Siege. This is not normally a story that we would be talking about because it's basically just a DLC drop, but it is just horrific. The skins that they're putting in the game are so disturbing to look at. You're getting a Pickle Rick outfit for Smoke, and Sledge is getting Gromflamite. Am I saying that right, Pete?
No idea, dude. I don't remember what a Gromflamite is.
They were the insect guys who were like one of the larger populations of, I think, like the people that Rick's the kind of bug guys from the first one that they turned into a larger amount of like a police force in space, so to speak.
And then as opposed to weirdly enough, sorry, you go.
Well, weirdly enough, that skin is, they're saying it's like, this weird bug creature. So therefore, he just has kind of the color palette of what those things look like. Mm-hmm. Whereas the pickled Rick skin for Smoke is incredibly distressing because of the way it reforms his limbs to look like the muscle that was attached onto the pickle, and yeah, with a big rat head, and the realistic render of that is incredibly distressing, and I don't want it in my Rainbow Six or my Rainbow Siege,
because it's like the outfit that he wears to go through the sewers. It's like the armor. It's not, for those not watching, you're not running around as a pickle, no. But it is just like insane to look at and such a strange thing to be putting in this game. But again, like Siege just carving out its own identity of like, we're just gonna put whatever we want in here, like a little bit like Fortnite, but way more disturbing.
Which I'm sure is great for the larger fan base, but I have a particular relationship with a friend of mine who we loved playing the Rainbow Six games from the original one. So we liked reading the books, we liked all the SWAT tactics and how it was super realistic. And I keep trying to get him to play more Siege, and every time he goes, it's gone silly. And I go, no, it hasn't. It's not that silly. There's only things like maybe, this character's got a funny gadget, which is a bit sci-fi. And then things like this happen, and I don't have a leg to stand on. Because you're like, look at this. I'm like, you're right, this is silly. So luckily just a skin, but doesn't help my argument with my mate Mike. So sorry about that.
Sorry, Mike. Actually, congratulations, Mike. Sorry, Gus. All right, well, that is all the news that you need to know that happened in video games this week.